Hi, everyone. I hope you and loved ones are all healthy and hibernating safely during this time. And maybe you yourself are going to a few more of these events and hearing from different people with different backgrounds from different walks of life and on different topics than before. I do hope that part of this pandemic at least largely stays with us moving forward. Speaking of, thanks to AFWERX for holding these different conversations and helping to bring contemporary conversations up like this. Throughout these days, you've heard from terrific leaders I truly admire, speak about a sweeping number of topics, so much so you might find yourself thinking about the foundations of infrastructure to the crucial delivery of DevSecOps environments to the need for new acquisition strategies like stop using FAR Part 15 IDIQ and start using FAR Part 12, or how to build the workforce of the future. Yes, they're already here, like millennials, hashtag adults under 40, just unleash them. And you'll think about all those seemingly unrelated topics because all those aspects are important on this journey to each of our respective enterprises. For you can't just shortcut with a purchase to the end without every piece of this AI scenario. Let's call it like it is, that's new. Most importantly though, I think the underlying theme both here today, yesterday, in the past, and moving forward in the future for our workforce is that learning is a lifetime sport. And I'm talking about the whole continuum of learning, not just reading some online articles, which you should do, but I mean dedicated learning, like with books. For myself, they're books like Sagan's Cosmos or Hawking's Universe in a Nutshell, or being 10 years old reading Brian Greene's The Elegant Universe over and over again, although string theory really didn't pan out. And most recently, maybe Harari's Sapiens, their favorites like Tolstoy, Huxley, Virginia Woolf, and so many more. People since the dawn of language and learning and eventual writing have debated and discussed consciousness, theories of physics, biology, social realities, technologies, and all the rest, because these constitute the human experience. The average person hears about them. Shoot, we experience them every single day. We know of the words, but not always what they mean. Essentially, for every topic, for the most part, has been brought to light. But a good book in this instance is something that inspires more. It brings to life a topic. And in my mind, that's a distinction with a difference. So while I look back and I think of learning in any meaningful way, I think it's centered around a candid dialogue. Maybe that's with others, but maybe that's with yourself too. And that's the most important dialogue, the internal one. And for me, the concepts of consciousness, experience, social order, biology, technology, frankly, the human story is brought together in the story of AI. With that said, I'm going to use that lens, which is the ultimate end state of this journey we're going to converse about today, the end state of both a very human problem and a technology one, in which our enterprises would be well served to operate under. So I'd like to start with a quote. Einstein is often attributed with saying, you don't really understand something until you can explain it to your own grandmother. And I think that's true. But had Einstein known my own grandmother, he would have altered his words maybe slightly. A more precise adage would be your grandmother is likely the smartest person you'll ever encounter. So if she doesn't understand your explanation, it's sure no one else will either. And that needs to be our guiding principle for our enterprises. So let's start at the crux of the matter. Most conversations about AI, whether in auditoriums, offices, coffee shops, or even on the line now, either begin or end with one or more of the following questions. What exactly is it? I bet that will come up. What aspects of our lives will be changed by it? Which of those changes will be beneficial? Which of them harmful? Where do the nations of the world stand in relation to one another, especially Russia and China, or your competitors in private business? And last, what can we do to ensure that AI is only used in legal, moral, and ethical ways? And although the answers to those questions merit long discussions and are totally open to differing opinions, they should at least be factually accurate and manageable. The topic shouldn't be difficult to discuss or debate, not conversationally or even at the policy making or political levels. Unfortunately, they generally are. But the disconnect that usually occurs isn't because of some complex technical detail or a confusing computer issue. It's usually and simply because of the same old obstacles that too often stand in the way of many other conversations, regardless of the topic. And when it matters most, we too frequently speak below, above, around, maybe past one another, especially when we don't have an equal amount of information, shared base of knowledge, or a common set of experiences. That word's going to be important later. Now, the best way to start is to first address the most common misperception of all, the ones we tend to bring into the tech conversation. The first of these is the assumption that AI is unavoidably destined sooner or later to develop its own consciousness and its own autonomous evil intent. Notice AI does not equal automation there. For that idea, we can thank science fiction and the entertainment industry. Make no mistake, I'm a fan. Without any doubt, the sci-fi genre has given us fine works of imagination, insight, and art. Many of those writers and filmmakers are extremely knowledgeable about technology and conscientiously concerned about our future, and we're better off for their work. But when it comes to their portrayals of AI, for instance, our most popular authors and screenwriters have too often generated an array of fears by focusing our attention on distant dystopian possibilities rather than the present day realities. That's it. Our workforces are thinking of robots. We must ask ourselves then, how do we get them to see the world through the lens of AI, technology in general, and not in the context of it's a jobs taker, which is basically equivalent to Terminator. So we have to peel this onion back just a little bit. Start at 2 points, or what we'll deem as premises. When we're trying to understand AI to the point in which we can help cultivate trust from an almost instinctual distrust. The first of our premises, or perhaps tenets, to build trust within our sphere of control is the terms AI, automation, DevSecOps. Literally most tech terms are so overused, misunderstood, and broad to the point they're meaningless. So how do we address that? The second is recognizing the fact that there's not yet a shared or prevailing and clear and convincing notion of trust. To say the least, we have an uphill battle. If you don't address both of these issues, you will not have a workforce ready to experiment, and harder yet, willing to adopt the things we'll discuss today in everyday business. Adoption is the first step towards this esoteric topic of trust. So what are things we trust? It's an interesting topic. I highly doubt there's anyone watching this right now that knows everything about everything we trust every day, like cars. Certainly we have mechanics who can build a car from the ground up, but does that make them great drivers? Or vice versa? There are plenty of great drivers that couldn't build a car, or if they could, they can't code the software in our cars today. Or why do I believe I'll even wake up tomorrow morning? I certainly believe and trust that, but in reality, there's no reason to. Or gravity. Sure, it affects us at an acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared, but not everyone can unpack Newtonian classical mechanics, and fewer can converse about our quantum reality or Everett's many worlds interpretation. Or my favorite, how about all of us who are in quarantine right now using our kitchen appliances more than ever? Could you build an oven? What about a microwave? Or the Instapot in my kitchen right now, which I love and I'm also totally afraid of when I hit the Steam release button. Simply put, we trust a lot of things we can't necessarily explain every aspect of. So it begs the question, why do we trust these things? Why do we even trust cars? We trust cars because we use them. We know when something is wrong most of the time. We have established lanes in the road, of course, pun intended. We know how they can be used for bad. We know how they can be used for good. We experience them. And that's where most organizations are failing, not diving in. Our goals need to be centered on pragmatism. How do we start that experience easily is the question. Here's the problem. There's too much techno-solutionism going on. Most AI projects begin and end in the same moment in the same misrepresentative boardroom they started. It's generally started with some executive who looks like everyone else in the room saying, hey, we need to do this AI thing. We don't know why, but I bet AI will make us better at X, whether it's finance, logistics, operations, or at the local clinic. And it's just that, a dream. And dreams without goals are just dreams. So let's get to some of the principles our enterprises should use to promote these concepts into existence. First, what seems like the tactical choices of today, the minutia, like what software choices to make or what programs you buy or the tools you pick, are really the strategic decisions of tomorrow. For example, let's say you're operating on Python 3.5. Well, you'll never be able to onboard the machine learning applications of today because your obsolete language package can't even implement the solutions that the workforce of the future are learning right now, or the leading commercial providers could give you. So it's about making sure the barriers to entry are at their lowest for our internal workforce and external providers. The second, data fuels the development of technologies like AI, and it requires a vast and diverse amount of representative data, whether that's from an authoritative source or generated through digitizing daily workflows. In order to train for continuous delivery, you should be principled on consistently generating training quality data for algorithmic development. For any of this to influence your operations, it should be provided and archived in near real time. This activity, however, is really only valuable if we trust how the data was obtained, generated, and trained. You should set policies and standards for this type of data. You should try to model, digitize, and instrument that everyday business workflow and the hacks we use in our lives. The third is don't make this too hard. Don't search for unique solutions or overpay, because the research and development and commercial world has held a belief that it is a due right to publicly develop AI and like technologies, which is correct for the most part. So it's likely your solution to your problem already exists on some GitHub repo out there as we speak, even for the most hairy or seemingly high-end problems the DoD faces. You just need to bring the people to bear on that, and that's where things matter. Our greatest asset, people. We should be developing people and employing a skilled, educated, and solution-oriented workforce in this space. And why? Here's the reality. This year, we'll have 50,000 people with STEM-like degrees for 500,000 open jobs. But we live in a world where the barriers to education have never been lower. I don't care if you have a college degree. Have you done it? Can you do it? How do we as an Air Force help drive down the gap is what matters most? Because in only a few short years, there will be 1 million, insert Dr. Evil here, open jobs in this space. We need to reimagine what education looks like. And lastly, AI and its ethical, moral, and legal use is of concern to our nation and the federal government. It affects us all. And why is that? It's because of bias. Machine learning applications are designed to analyze data and formulate predictions without any overall guidance from us. That doesn't mean, however, that machine learning is safe from the effects of influence in human biases. It's not. Just because an algorithm's analysis is based only on the data doesn't mean its output will be neutral or objectively fair. It's a reality that human biases are reflected in data. And when they are, it stands to reason that any analyses, strategies, or prediction based on that data will be biased as well. And worse, if decisions are made or actions are taken based on bias analysis, then the underlying biases will of course perpetuate, possibly ingrain many of the historical and cultural inequities even deeper into our lives. And this matters more than ever. And it's a liability, I know, but a good liability. It's what makes us different than countries like China and Russia who don't care, and one we should all pay close attention to. So one last thing, what does it all mean? That's a monumental question, but these are monumental times. The full implications of effect of AI and these technologies remain to be seen in point. What we do in our enterprises with respect to technology will impact our present, our future, and perhaps our eventual destinies. The strengths of this free nation, democratically represented people, are and always will be the ability to work cooperatively together in order to preserve our individual liberties and ways of life. It's not a time to disconnect or be passive or distracted. The story is, of course, only beginning, but understanding current technologies and their potential, both good and bad, is essential, and caring is crucial. One thing I've learned in my short years so far is that our best leadership takes its cues from the needs of its ranks. Likewise, democracy takes direction from the voice of its people. No system is perfect, but democracy gives standing to its people for the fundamental purpose of ensuring their needs are heard and their rights protected. Ideally, those voices are at least generally aware or informed of the conflicts and potential compromises we face. Effective democracy and moving forward depends on that. So I'm going to leave you with a quote. Our focus now must be to openly address the current realities of AI so we can assure to the best of our abilities that it is only implemented in ways consistent with our fundamental beliefs and only for purposes consistent with democratic dignities, liberties, and laws. And that sounds pretty good, but let's add to that for a second. To convince the public in particular that using AI to achieve these means is necessary and a desirable part of our society, but we cannot afford to do so unless we know how it will be best used and when. But in the end, the future demands we make moral decisions as we begin to build a world that is truly safe and sustainable, one where humans and AI exist together. That last part sounds pretty good, but I didn't come up with that. The first quote I did. The second part, I used my quote on a natural language processing prediction algorithm to make the second quote. And I don't think I could have said it better myself. That's where we stand today. That's how we have mis and disinformation. That's how we question reality and what's real. That's why it's important our workforces understand and make thoughtful choices moving forward. It takes everyone to be involved. So in closing, I'd like to thank you for this time, AFWERX for the opportunity, and if this contributes in any way to a better understanding of technology, AI, and an enhanced appreciation of its significance, then I guess mission accomplished. It's time for another awakening, a public awareness, a conscientious consensus. The choices we make now are important. Building trust and experience must be our goal. For those who look back upon this time, should not be left wishing our eyes were more open on the topic. Thanks again. Look forward to talking with you later.